The majestic cathedral stood silent except for the priest's solemn prayer. Rain streaked down its ancient stone facade, as if the heavens themselves mourned Isabel Harrington's passing. Inside, James Harrington, billionaire, titan of industry, and now widower, stood motionless beside his wife's casket. His sharp suit and sharper gaze couldn't hide the slight trembling of his hands. The man who controlled empires couldn't control his grief. "We gather to commemorate the life of Isabel Marie Harrington, beloved wife." The priest's words were suddenly shattered by a high-pitched scream that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. "You killed my mom." All heads turned to see a small figure stumbling through the center aisle, a soaking wet little girl, no more than 5 years old, her tattered rainbow scarf trailing behind her like a banner of accusation. "You made her go away." The child pointed directly at James, tears streaming down her face, mixing with rainwater. "You made Mommy leave me." Who was this child, and why was she accusing one of the most powerful men in the country of killing his own wife? Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. James Harrington had it all: a billion-dollar empire, respect in the business world, and a beautiful wife who graced magazine covers and charity galas. But beneath the polished surface of their perfect life lurked shadows that would only be revealed by the piercing cry of a child no one knew existed. Isabel Harrington's death had been ruled a suicide. Pills and slashed wrists, a tragedy that shocked high society. "Depression," they whispered. "The pressure of being a Harrington," others suggested. The congregation fell silent, a collective breath held as the child's accusation hung in the air. James Harrington stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and shock. "Mommy promised she'd never leave me." The little girl sobbed, her tiny body shaking with grief. "She promised," as she collapsed to her knees in exhaustion, her worn rainbow scarf pooling around her. Not a soul moved to help her. The ushers looked uncertainly at James, waiting for direction. "Who is she?" James whispered, the question echoing through the silent cathedral. Eleanor Harrington, James's mother, moved swiftly to his side, her elegant black hat tilted to shield her expression. "Have the child removed?" she hissed, but James held up a hand to stop anyone from approaching. 3 days earlier, Isabel Harrington's body had been discovered in her private bathroom, the marble floors stained crimson. The official report: suicide by medication overdose and self-inflicted wounds. James had found her too late to save her, and now the scandal-hungry press would have a field day with this new development. Already, James could see smartphones discreetly recording the scene, despite the funeral's supposed privacy. James slowly approached the sobbing child, kneeling down to her level while maintaining a careful distance. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man known for ruthless boardroom tactics. "Mia," she hiccuped, clutching the rainbow scarf like a lifeline. "Isabel was my mommy." The gathered mourners gasped. James felt the floor tilt beneath him. Isabel had no children, at least none he knew of. "That's impossible," Eleanor cut in, her voice like ice. "My daughter-in-law had no children. This is clearly some attempt at." "She came to see me every Tuesday and Friday," Mia insisted, her small voice finding strength. "She brought me books and we made pictures. She tucked me in and kissed my head and said I was her special girl." James's world was crumbling. Tuesdays and Fridays, the evenings Isabel claimed were for her charity work. The evenings he never bothered to ask about because he was too consumed with business. "James, this is ridiculous. Have security escort this child out," Eleanor insisted, placing a manicured hand on his shoulder. But something in the little girl's eyes, something painfully familiar, stopped him. She had Isabel's eyes, not genetically perhaps, but something in that gaze. "Where did you come from, Mia?" James asked quietly. "The shelter. I ran away when I saw Mommy on the television. They said she was gone forever." Fresh tears welled up. "But that can't be true because she promised she'd never leave me." Security approached, but James waved them off. "Find whoever's responsible for her," he instructed his assistant, "and bring them to my office after the service." Eleanor's lips thinned to a disapproving line, but James ignored her. The service continued, but nothing was the same. James's eulogy felt hollow as questions thundered in his mind. Who was this child? What other secrets had Isabel kept from him? And most disturbing of all, could there be truth to the child's accusation? After the service, James found himself in a private room off the main cathedral hall, watching as Mia huddled in an oversized chair, still clutching her rainbow scarf. His private investigator, David, entered with a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Sarah from New Beginnings Women's Shelter. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrington," Sarah said, her eyes darting nervously between him and Mia. "We had no idea she'd slipped out. She saw the news about Mrs. Harrington and became very upset. Explain to me why my wife was playing mother to this child," James demanded, his voice low to avoid upsetting Mia further. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Harrington has been visiting Mia for almost 3 years. Mia's biological mother, Clara, was one of our residents. She passed away from cancer when Mia was 2, and your wife, she stepped in. Not legally, but emotionally. She was the only mother figure Mia has known since then. James struggled to process this information. 3 years. For 3 years, his wife had been mothering a child he knew nothing about. Why wasn't I informed of this arrangement? He asked. Sarah's expression said everything. Isabel had deliberately kept him in the dark. I believe that's a question only Mrs. Harrington could answer. Sarah replied diplomatically. James glanced at Mia, who had fallen asleep, exhausted from her emotional outburst and daring escape to the cathedral. She says I killed her mother. Why would she think that? The question was barely a whisper. Sarah hesitated. Children process grief in different ways. Mia may have overheard something or simply needs someone to blame. She knows your face from photographs Mrs. Harrington showed her. David, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat. Sir, I've already begun looking into this. Mrs. Harrington visited the shelter regularly for the past 3 years, always on Tuesday and Friday evenings. Tuesday and Friday evenings. The nights James worked late. The nights he barely noticed his wife's absence because he was too consumed with his own priorities. I want everything, James said firmly. Every visit, every conversation, every person my wife interacted with at that shelter. And I want to know why this child thinks I'm responsible for her death. As Sarah prepared to take Mia back to the shelter, the child woke and began to cry again. No, I want to stay with Mommy. She clutched her rainbow scarf tighter. James noticed something about the scarf then. The intricate pattern looked handmade. Did Isabel make that for you? He asked quietly. Mia nodded, her lower lip trembling. She made it for my birthday, she said. She said whenever I wear it, it's like she's hugging me. The words struck James like a physical blow. In that moment, he realized how little he knew about the woman he'd been married to for 7 years. She can stay at the mansion tonight, James decided suddenly. She shouldn't be uprooted again today. Miss Sarah, if you'll accompany her as her guardian, my staff will prepare rooms for both of you. Eleanor, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. James, this is highly inappropriate. We don't even know if this child's story is true. James turned to his mother, seeing for the first time something calculating in her gaze. Mother, I need to understand what happened. This child was important to Isabel. That makes her important to me. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly before her face smoothed back into its usual composed expression. Of course, darling. You're upset. We all are. I'll have my driver take me home. She glanced at Mia with undisguised distaste before leaving. As James watched Mia clutching Isabel's handmade scarf, a terrible thought occurred to him. Had he truly known his wife at all? And if he had missed something this significant, what else had he failed to see? The Harrington mansion stood like a fortress against the night. Rain continued to fall, matching James's darkening mood as he entered Isabel's private study, a room he'd rarely visited when she was alive. Now, with David's help, he was searching for answers. The room was elegantly appointed, with bookshelves lining the walls and a delicate desk by the window that overlooked the garden. It felt like Isabel, refined, thoughtful, and somehow distant. Where would she keep personal items? James asked, feeling like an intruder in his own home. David, ever efficient, pointed to a small lockbox partially hidden behind books on the lowest shelf. There, sir. The box required a key, which James didn't have. Get it open, he insisted, turning his attention to Isabel's desk. The drawers contained the expected items, stationery, pens, receipts. But in the bottom drawer, beneath a false bottom that James discovered purely by chance, he found a leather-bound journal. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, in Isabel's flowing handwriting, were entries spanning the last 3 years. The 15th of September. Visited the shelter again today. Mia is learning to read. She's so bright. She asked about my big house and whether she could visit someday. I didn't know what to tell her. James would never allow it. He barely notices when I'm gone. James winced at the words. Had he really been so oblivious? The 30th of November. Eleanor cornered me at the charity gala. More questions about when I'll provide an heir, as if my worth is measured only by my womb. If she knew about Mia, she'd be furious. A shelter child is hardly the Harrington heir she envisions. But Mia fills the void in my heart that grows white each day in this cold house. James turned the pages, each entry revealing more about the wife he thought he knew. The 22nd of February. James canceled our anniversary dinner for a business meeting. Again, I spent the evening with Mia instead. She made me a card with a rainbow on it. Said rainbows appear after storms to make people happy again. She makes me happy when nothing else does. I've started knitting her a rainbow scarf. David cleared his throat, holding up a small key he'd found hidden in a book. For the lockbox, sir. Inside the lockbox were photographs, dozens of them. Isabel and Mia at the shelter, reading together. Mia blowing out candles on a small cake, Isabel beaming beside her. Isabel helping Mia with finger painting. In every photo, Isabel looked happier than James could remember seeing her in years. Beneath the photos was a legal document that made James's blood run cold. Adoption papers, drawn up but never filed. Isabel had been planning to adopt Mia officially. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. "What would you think about adopting?" Isabel had asked one evening, her voice casual but her eyes intense. James, barely looking up from his laptop, had dismissed the idea. "We've discussed this, Isabel. I don't have time for children right now. Maybe in a few years. And if I can't wait a few years?" Her voice had held a note he'd failed to hear. "Then I suggest you find something to occupy your time. Your charity work seems to do the trick." James set down the journal, his chest tight. "She was going to adopt Mia," he said aloud. "Without telling you?" David asked, sounding surprised. "No," James realized, looking at the unfiled papers. "She couldn't go through with it without my signature. She was trapped." At that moment, his phone rang. It was the medical examiner who had handled Isabel's case. "Mr. Harrington, I've been reviewing Mrs. Harrington's toxicology reports as you requested. There's something unusual I think you should know about." James listened, his face paling as the examiner explained that while Isabel had indeed taken pills, they weren't what they appeared to be. The prescription bottles had been filled with medications other than what the labels indicated, medications that would cause drowsiness and confusion, but not necessarily death. The primary cause of death was the loss of blood from the wounds to her wrists, not the medication, the examiner concluded, and given the strange medication switch, reopening the investigation. James thanked him and hung up, turning to David. "Someone tampered with her medication," he said, his voice hollow. "That would support the theory that someone else was involved in her death," David noted carefully. "Or that she was being drugged before her death," James added. "I need to speak with the staff who had access to her medications." The next morning, James found Mia in the garden with Sarah. The child was quieter today, her wild accusation from the funeral replaced by a solemn watchfulness that seemed too old for her years. "Good morning," James said awkwardly, unsure how to speak to a child, especially one who believed he had killed her mother figure. Mia just stared at him, clutching her rainbow scarf. "Mia," Sarah prompted gently. "Mr. Harrington said good morning." "Morning," Mia mumbled, looking down at her shoes, new ones that James's housekeeper had purchased to replace her worn ones. "I was wondering if you could tell me about the time you spent with Isabel," James said, sitting on a garden bench, at what he hoped was a non-threatening distance. Mia looked up, suspicious. "Why?" "Because I miss her too," James said honestly. "And it seems like you knew parts of her that I didn't." Something in his tone must have reached her, because Mia's expression softened slightly. "She read me stories," Mia said, "and she taught me to draw flowers. She said I could come live in her garden someday." "Did she ever seem sad when she was with you?" James asked carefully. Mia nodded. "Sometimes she cried. She said it was because she was happy to see me, but her eyes were too sad for happy tears." "Did she ever mention why she was sad?" Mia scrunched her face in thought. "She said her home was cold even when it was sunny, and that the dragon lady made her feel small." "Dragon lady?" James repeated, confused. "The scary lady with the pointy shoes and the mean eyes," Mia explained. "The one who was at the church yesterday." James felt a chill. "Do you mean Eleanor? My mother?" Mia nodded vigorously. "She came to the shelter once. She was very angry at Mommy. She said mean things that made Mommy cry. After that, Mommy was extra sad for a long time." James exchanged a look with Sarah, who nodded confirmation. "Your mother did visit once, about 6 months ago," Sarah explained. "I don't know what was said, but Isabel was upset afterward. She started coming less frequently after that, and when she did come, she seemed diminished somehow." Eleanor had known about Mia and never told him? James felt the ground shifting beneath him again. "Mia," he asked gently, "why did you say I killed your mom? Did someone tell you that?" Mia's lower lip trembled. "I heard the ladies talking at the shelter. They said Mommy was sad because her husband didn't love her, and then I saw on television that she went to heaven. If you loved her, she wouldn't be gone." The simple logic of a child's grief. James felt tears prick his eyes for the first time since Isabel's death. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "adults can be sad even when people love them. And sometimes we don't show our love well enough for others to see it." "Did you love Mommy?" Mia asked directly, her gaze unnervingly perceptive. James hesitated. Had he loved Isabel? He had married her, provided for her, been faithful. But had he loved her the way she needed? The surrounding him suggested not. "Yes," he said finally, "but I don't think I showed her properly, and I'm very sorry for that." Mia seemed to consider this. then reached out and patted his hand awkwardly. Mommy said it's good to say sorry when you make mistakes. In that moment, with a child's simple wisdom cutting through his defenses, James felt something break inside him. Tears he had held back at the funeral, at the morgue, even alone in his bedroom, finally began to fall. Mia watched him cry with solemn curiosity, then wordlessly offered him the end of her rainbow scarf. "When I'm sad, this helps," she explained. James took the soft fabric, marveling at the complexity of the pattern. Isabel had put such care into this gift for a child he never knew existed. His phone buzzed with a message from David. "Found something important. Surveillance footage from the mansion on the night of Mrs. Harrington's death shows someone entering her room before the estimated time of death. It's Mrs. Eleanor Harrington." James stared at the message, the pieces beginning to align in a disturbing pattern. His mother had known about Mia, had visited the shelter, had accessed Isabel's room the night she died, and now she was insisting that Mia be returned to the shelter immediately. "Sarah," James said, his decision made, "I'd like to visit the shelter where Isabel volunteered, today, if possible." He needed to see this hidden part of his wife's life, and perhaps find the answers that would explain her death. New Beginnings Women's Shelter was nothing like James had imagined. Located in a renovated brownstone in a struggling neighborhood, it wasn't the sterile institution he'd pictured, but rather a warm, lived-in space that somehow managed to feel like a home despite its worn furniture and mismatched decor. Children's artwork adorned the walls, bright splashes of crayon and paint that reminded James of the rainbow scarf Mia never let go of. As he walked through the common areas, women and children watched him curiously. His expensive suit and the luxury car parked outside marked him as an outsider. Sarah led him to a small office where a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair waited. "Mr. Harrington, this is Director Martinez. She runs New Beginnings and worked closely with Isabel." Director Martinez didn't stand to greet him, nor did she offer her hand. Instead, she assessed him with a gaze that seemed to see right through his wealth and status. "So you're Isabel's husband," she said finally. "I wasn't sure you actually existed." The comment stung more than James expected. "I understand my wife spent a significant amount of time here," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "Isabel was more than a donor or volunteer," Director Martinez replied. "She was family to many of our residents, especially to Mia." She gestured to several photographs on the wall behind her desk. Isabel surrounded by women and children, her smile radiant in a way James rarely saw at home. "I'd like to understand her connection to this place," James said. "It seems I didn't know my wife as well as I thought." Director Martinez's expression softened slightly. "Isabel came to us about 3 years ago. She said she wanted to do more than write checks. She wanted to be involved. When she met Clara, Mia's biological mother, they formed an immediate bond." "Clara?" James prompted. "A remarkable young woman, single mother, terminal cancer diagnosis, but determined to ensure her daughter would be cared for. Isabel took a special interest in them both." Director Martinez pulled a file from her desk. After Clara passed, Isabel stepped in. Not officially. She made it clear her home situation was complicated, but she became Mia's emotional anchor, twice a week, without fail. She handed James a stack of childish drawings. Each one was signed, "For Mommy Izzy," in wobbly letters, depicting stick figures holding hands under rainbows. "Why didn't she tell me?" James asked, the question directed as much to himself as to Director Martinez. The director's gaze was direct. "She tried, Mr. Harrington, many times, but according to Isabel, you were unreceptive to the idea of children." Another memory surfaced. Isabel showing him a brochure for an adoption agency over breakfast. He had dismissed it without really looking, talking instead about a merger he was working on. Had that been one of her attempts? "There's something else you should know," Director Martinez continued. "About 6 months ago, Isabel came in very upset. Your mother had discovered her connection to Mia and the shelter. What happened? I don't know the details. Isabel took a private call in this office. When she came out, she was pale and shaking. She said your mother had threatened to expose her inappropriate attachment if she didn't, quote, focus on her actual responsibilities as a Harrington wife." James felt sick. This aligned with what Mia had called the Dragon Lady incident. "After that, Isabel changed," Director Martinez continued. "She started looking over her shoulder, checking her phone constantly. She seemed afraid." "Of my mother?" James asked incredulously. Director Martinez shrugged. "Of someone. She began making arrangements for Mia, setting up a trust fund, talking about contingency plans. It was as if she was preparing for something, or preparing to leave," James murmured, the realization dawning. The adoption papers he'd found. Isabel had been planning either to leave him and take Mia with her, Was she depressed? He asked abruptly. Director Martinez considered the question carefully. Not in the clinical sense, no. Sad, certainly. Increasingly anxious. But not suicidal, Mr. Harrington. Isabel was making plans for the future, not preparing to end her life. James showed her the adoption papers he'd brought from the lockbox. She was planning to adopt Mia officially. Director Martinez nodded. She mentioned it. Yes. She was working up the courage to insist you sign the papers. Or what? Or to leave you and do it on her own, she said bluntly. She said she couldn't live in that beautiful prison anymore, not when she knew what real love felt like with Mia. The words hit James like a physical blow. Prison? Was that how Isabel had seen their life together? The night before she died, Director Martinez continued. Isabel called me. She sounded strangely slurred, confused. She said she was watching her, that she couldn't escape. I assumed she meant your mother, but she wouldn't confirm it. She said she'd hidden something important in Mia's favorite book, and that if anything happened to her, I should make sure Mia was protected. What book? James asked urgently. The Rainbow Fish. It was the story Isabel read to Mia most often. James remembered seeing the children's book in Isabel's study. And did you check it after? Director Martinez shook her head. By the time we heard about Isabel's death, your staff had already packed up her things from Mia's room here. The book went missing. A crucial piece of evidence, potentially gone. James made a mental note to have David search the house again. One last thing, Mr. Harrington, Director Martinez said as he prepared to leave. Isabel recorded videos for Mia, birthday messages, bedtime stories. She kept them on her private laptop. If you can find that, it might help you understand what she was going through in her final months. James nodded, his mind racing with all this new information. Thank you for your candor, he said formally, unsure how else to express his gratitude. As he turned to leave, Director Martinez called after him. Mr. Harrington, Isabel loved that little girl enough to risk everything. Remember that when you decide what happens to Mia now. Back at the mansion, James instructed David to search for both the Rainbow Fish book and Isabel's personal laptop, neither of which had been cataloged in the inventory of her possessions after her death. While waiting, he visited Mia, who was napping in the guest room Sarah had been assigned. The child clutched her rainbow scarf even in sleep, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been while awake. For the first time, James allowed himself to really look at her, not as an intruder or a complication, but as someone Isabel had loved deeply. There was something about her determination, her fierce loyalty to Isabel, that touched him unexpectedly. He tucked the blanket more securely around her small shoulders, feeling strangely protective. Whatever happened next, he would ensure Mia was cared for properly. He owed Isabel that much at least. David found him in his study an hour later, holding Isabel's laptop and a children's book with a glittering fish on the cover. The laptop was in the false bottom of her wardrobe, David explained, and the book was mixed in with some personal items the staff had packed away. James opened the Rainbow Fish carefully, flipping through the colorful pages. At first, he saw nothing unusual, but when he examined the spine, he noticed it had been carefully modified. Hidden inside was a small USB drive. Let's see what's on this, he said, inserting it into Isabel's laptop. The drive contained several files, one labeled for Mia's 18th birthday, another labeled in case, and a third simply titled James. His hand hovered over the mouse. These were Isabel's private thoughts, perhaps her final ones. Did he have the right to view them? But if she had been murdered, if his mother was somehow involved, then these files might contain crucial evidence. He clicked on the file with his name. Isabel's face filled the screen, beautiful but tired, with dark circles under her eyes that her careful makeup couldn't quite conceal. James, she began, her voice soft. If you're watching this, then either I found the courage to show you, or something has happened to me. I hope it's the former, but I fear it may be the latter. She took a deep breath. There's so much I should have told you over the years, but you seemed so distant, so consumed by your work. I stopped trying after a while. That was my mistake. I need to tell you about Mia, she continued. She's the daughter of a woman I met at New Beginnings Shelter. When her mother died, I couldn't bear to let her enter the foster system. She's special, James. She helped me remember what love feels like. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to adopt her officially. I've been trying to find the courage to insist, but your mother. She looked over her shoulder, as if afraid of being overheard. Eleanor discovered my connection to Mia 6 months ago. She's been monitoring me ever since, threatening me. James felt his chest tighten. His mother, intimidating Isabel? At first, it was just comments. How I was failing as a wife by not providing an heir. How my charity cases were an embarrassment to the Harrington name. But lately, it's escalated. She comes into our home when you're away, goes through my things. The answer to her, not me. Isabel wiped her eyes. Last week I found her in my bathroom, looking through my medication. When I confronted her, she said she was concerned about my mental state. But James, I think she's been tampering with my pills. I've been having blackouts, confusion, things I can't explain. The medical examiner's findings, the switched medication, suddenly made horrifying sense. I've been collecting evidence, Isabel continued. Photos of her entering my rooms, recordings of her threats. They're all on this drive. I was going to take Mia and leave. I've set up accounts she can't access. Made arrangements with Director Martinez. She leaned closer to the camera, her expression desperate. If something happens to me, please protect Mia. And James, I did love you. I think you loved me once too, before the company became everything. I wish we could have found our way back to each other. The video ended abruptly, leaving James staring at a black screen, his heart pounding. What had his mother done? He quickly opened the other files on the drive. They contained exactly what Isabel had described: security footage from inside the mansion showing Eleanor entering Isabel's rooms when both James and Isabel were out, audio recordings of veiled threats, and photos of pill bottles before and after Eleanor's visits, showing subtle differences in the medication inside. It was damning evidence. But was it proof of murder? Or had Eleanor's psychological torment driven Isabel to take her own life? A type of murder no less real but harder to prosecute. As James contemplated his next move, his phone rang. It was the medical examiner again. Mr. Harrington, we've found something unusual on your wife's body during the secondary examination. There are faint bruises on her arms and shoulders documented in the initial report. They're consistent with someone holding her down forcefully. James closed his eyes, the final piece falling into place. This wasn't suicide. It wasn't even driven suicide. It was murder. And his mother was almost certainly responsible. Eleanor Harrington's estate sat on 5 manicured acres just outside the city, a Georgian mansion that had been in her family for generations before she married into the Harrington fortune. It was where James had grown up, in rooms too large and formal for a child's comfort. As his car approached the wrought iron gates, James felt a cold resolve settle over him. In his briefcase were copies of everything he had discovered: the USB drive, the medical reports, the security footage. His mother had meticulously constructed the appearance of Isabel's suicide while systematically driving her to despair. The housekeeper led him to the sunroom, where Eleanor sat reading, the picture of aristocratic leisure. She looked up with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "James, darling, what a pleasant surprise. How are you holding up?" He didn't return her smile. "I know what you did to Isabel." Eleanor's expression didn't falter, but her fingers tightened slightly on her book. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Your wife took her own life. Tragic as that was." "Stop lying," James said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I have evidence, Mother. Security footage, tampered medication, the bruises on her arms where you held her down." The medical examiner has reopened the case. For the first time, Eleanor's composure slipped. She set down her book and met his gaze directly. "You always were too clever for your own good," she said finally. "What do you think you know? I know you discovered Isabel's connection to Mia and the shelter. I know you threatened her, gaslighted her, tampered with her medication to make her seem unstable. And I know that on the night she died, you were in her room." Eleanor stood, moving to pour herself a drink from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. Her hands were steady, too steady, as if maintaining control required all her concentration. "You have no idea what that woman was planning," she said, her back to him. "She was going to leave you, James, take a significant portion of your assets, and adopt some shelter child as if bloodlines mean nothing. She was going to humiliate you publicly." "She was going to leave because I neglected her," James corrected. "Because I was too blind to see she was unhappy. But you saw her vulnerability and exploited it." Eleanor turned, her expression hardening. "I protected you, the Harrington legacy, everything your father and I built. By committing murder?" James's voice rose despite his efforts to remain calm. "It wasn't supposed to be murder," Eleanor snapped, the facade finally cracking. "I just wanted her gone, divorced, disgraced, discredited. The medication was to make her seem unstable, to ensure you'd get favorable terms when the marriage ended. But it didn't work fast enough for you," James pressed. Eleanor took a long sip of her drink. She was stronger than I expected, cleverer too. She was gathering evidence against me, making arrangements. That night I confronted her, told her I knew everything about the offshore accounts she'd set up, the apartment she'd leased. "She was escaping you," James realized. "She was stealing what belonged to our family," Eleanor corrected sharply. When I confronted her, she became hysterical, said she had evidence of what I'd done with her medication, that she'd go to the police. She tried to call someone, that shelter woman, I assume. James remembered what Director Martinez had said about Isabel's strange call the night before she died. "We struggled," Eleanor continued, her voice distant, as if recounting events that had happened to someone else. "She fell against the bathroom counter, hit her head. She was dazed. I saw her prescription bottles and it seemed like an opportunity." "You forced her to take the pills," James said, feeling sick. "I suggested it would be easier than the scandal that would follow if she tried to leave you," Eleanor said coldly. "When she refused, things became physical. I only meant to restrain her, but she fought. There was a letter opener on her vanity." James closed his eyes, imagining his wife's final moments, terrified, drugged, struggling against his mother while he was at a business dinner, oblivious. "She stopped fighting eventually," Eleanor said, her voice almost hollow now. "I arranged things to look like suicide. The pills, the wrists. It was cleaner that way. Better for everyone." "Better for you," James corrected, his voice shaking with rage. "Not for Isabel, not for Mia, not for me. That child is nothing to you," Eleanor said dismissively. "Some charity case Isabel latched onto because she couldn't give you children of her own. That charity case was the only person who made Isabel happy in the last years of her life," James retorted. "While I ignored her and you tormented her." He removed a recorder from his pocket, stopping the recording. "You understand what happens next," he said, no longer a question. For the first time, fear flickered across Eleanor's aristocratic features. "You wouldn't turn in your own mother. You stopped being my mother the moment you decided my wife's life was yours to take," James said coldly. "The police are already on their way. I called them before I came in." As if on cue, sirens became audible in the distance. Eleanor's face contorted with anger. "Everything I did was for you, to protect what we built." "No," James said, standing. "Everything you did was to maintain your control. Over me, over the Harrington name. But it's over now." As police cars pulled up outside, lights flashing against the manicured hedges, Eleanor seemed to shrink, suddenly looking every one of her 70 years. "What will happen to the company?" she asked, her priorities clear even now. "The scandal will damage the share price." "I don't care," James realized, the truth of it surprising him. "None of that matters compared to what you took from Isabel, from Mia, from me, from me." The police entered with a warrant, led by a detective James had spoken with earlier that day. As they read Eleanor her rights, she maintained her dignity, looking through the officers as if they were servants beneath her notice. Only when they led her toward the door did she pause beside James. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "Blood matters more than you know." "You're right," he replied, "which is why I'm going to honor Isabel's blood oath to protect Mia, the promise she made to a dying mother. That's what real family does." As the police car carrying his mother disappeared down the long driveway, James felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The woman who had shaped his life, who had taught him that business came before all else, who had molded him into the neglectful husband he'd become, was gone. And in her absence, perhaps he could become someone better, someone worthy of honoring Isabel's memory. When James returned to the mansion, he found Sarah and Mia in the garden. The child was helping the gardener plant flowers, her small hands carefully patting soil around delicate seedlings. "These were Mommy's favorites," she was explaining seriously to the tolerant gardener. "She said they're called Forget Me Nots." The irony of the name wasn't lost on James. Isabel had created a memorial garden here, flowers that would bloom year after year, keeping her memory alive in a home where she had felt forgotten. Sarah approached James while Mia continued planting. "How did it go?" she asked quietly, aware of the significance of his visit to Eleanor. "My mother confessed," he said simply. "She's been arrested. There will be a trial." Sarah nodded, absorbing this. "And Mia?" It was the question that had occupied James's thoughts during the entire drive home. What was best for this child who had already lost so much? Who believed, not entirely incorrectly, that he was responsible for her beloved Mommy Izzy's death. "I'd like to honor Isabel's wishes," he said finally. "She wanted to adopt Mia. I'd like to continue that process, if it's possible." Sarah looked surprised. "That's a significant commitment, Mr. Harrington, especially for someone who didn't want children," he finished for her. "I know, but Isabel saw something in Mia worth fighting for, worth dying for, in the end. I owe it to both of them to try." "It won't be easy," Sarah warned. "Mia is traumatized. She's lost 2 mothers now, and her feelings toward you are complicated." "I don't expect it to be easy," James acknowledged. "But I think it might be right." As if sensing she was being discussed, Mia looked up from her planting. Soil smudged her cheek and forehead, and the ever-present rainbow scarf had dirt on one end. Seeing James, her expression grew cautious. He approached slowly and knelt beside her. not caring about his expensive suit against the garden soil. "Those look beautiful," he said, indicating the tiny blue flowers she had planted. "They're for Mommy," Mia said solemnly, "so she knows we remember her." "That's a wonderful idea," James agreed. Isabel loved this garden. Mia studied him with that uncanny perceptiveness. "You look sad," she observed. "I am sad," James admitted. "I found out some bad things about my mother today. She hurt Isabel. That's why Isabel is gone." Mia's eyes widened. "The dragon lady hurt Mommy?" "Yes," James said, deciding that honesty, in simple terms, was best, and she's going to be punished for it. Mia considered this. "So you didn't make Mommy go away?" "No," James said, his voice catching. "But I didn't make her happy enough to stay, and I'm very sorry for that." Mia reached out and patted his hand awkwardly, mimicking the way adults had likely comforted her. "It's okay to be sorry," she said sagely. "Mommy said everyone makes mistakes, even grown-ups." James smiled despite the tears threatening. She was very wise. "Your Mommy, Izzy." "What's going to happen to me now?" Mia asked, the brief moment of connection giving her courage. "Do I have to go back to the shelter?" The question hung in the air between them, this moment that would define both their futures. "I was hoping," James said carefully, "that you might want to stay here, in this house, with this garden. Isabel wanted to adopt you, to make you officially her daughter. I found the papers she prepared." Mia's eyes grew round. "Really? Really? And if it's okay with you, I'd like to continue what she started. I'd like you to stay here, with me. We could plant flowers for her together, and I could read you the rainbow fish like she used to. But you're not my daddy," Mia said, logic asserting itself. "No," James agreed, "but I could learn to be if you'd give me a chance." Mia twisted her rainbow scarf thoughtfully. "Would I have to call you Daddy?" "You could call me James until you feel ready for something else," he assured her. "There's no rush." Mia looked around the garden, at the mansion beyond, then back to James. "Can Sarah stay too? I like her." "Of course," James said, making a mental note to offer Sarah a position as Mia's nanny. "Whatever makes you comfortable." Mia seemed to debate internally, then nodded, her decision made with the decisive clarity of childhood. "Okay, I'll stay. But you have to promise never to be mean like the dragon lady." "I promise," James said solemnly. "And you have to read the rainbow fish the right way, with all the voices like Mommy did." "I'll practice," he promised. "And when I'm sad, you have to understand that sometimes I'll miss Mommy very much." "I'll miss her too," James said truthfully. "We can miss her together." Mia considered this, then extended her pinky finger. "Pinky promise?" James linked his much larger pinky with hers. "Pinky promise." As they returned to planting forget-me-nots, James felt something shift within him. Not healing, not yet, but the possibility of it. A space opening where something new could grow from the ashes of tragedy. Isabel was gone, but her love lived on in this small, fierce child with dirt on her face and wisdom beyond her years. And perhaps, in learning to be the father Mia needed, James might become the man Isabel had always hoped he could be. 6 months passed, marked by the changing seasons in Isabel's garden. Spring blossoms gave way to summer flowers, which were now fading into the rich hues of autumn. The forget-me-nots Mia had planted were dormant now, but would return next year, a promise of renewal. Much had changed at the Harrington mansion. Rooms once kept pristine for appearances now showed signs of life. A child's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, picture books stacked on coffee tables, a small purple bicycle parked haphazardly near the front entrance. Eleanor's trial had concluded with a guilty verdict. The evidence James provided, combined with her own confession, had been damning. She would spend the remainder of her life in prison. The Harrington name now associated with a scandal far greater than anything Isabel's departure might have caused. The company had weathered the storm, partly because James had stepped back, appointing a CEO to handle daily operations, while he focused on what mattered more, creating a home for Mia. The adoption process was complex, especially given the circumstances, but Director Martinez and the shelter staff provided crucial support and testimony about Isabel's bond with Mia. The court ultimately recognized the unique situation and granted James's petition, with the formal adoption ceremony scheduled for the following week. On this particular afternoon, James sat in what had once been his formal home office, now transformed into a comfortable study where Mia often joined him. Children's artwork decorated walls that had once displayed business awards. An overstuffed reading chair had replaced his imposing desk, creating a cozy nook where he and Mia read together every evening. He was reviewing adoption paperwork when Mia burst in, rainbow scarf flying behind her like a superhero cape. "James, look what I found," she exclaimed, waving a photograph. It was an old picture of Isabel, taken perhaps 15 years earlier. She stood in front of a ballet studio, wearing a leotard and wrap skirt, her expression joyful and carefree. "Where did you find this?" James asked, taking the photo carefully. "In the attic. Sarah was helping me look for Halloween costume ideas, and we found a big box of Mommy's things from before she met you." James studied the photograph. He had never seen this side of Isabel, young, unguarded, pursuing her own passion. By the time they met, she had already set aside her dancing to fit into the socialite role expected of a potential Harrington wife. "She looks happy," he observed. "Sarah says I could take ballet lessons too," Mia said hopefully. "Do you think Mommy would like that?" James smiled. "I think she'd love it. We can look into classes this week." Mia beamed, then grew suddenly serious. "There's something else." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, a child's drawing of 3 figures, a small one with brown pigtails, a taller one with yellow hair, and a very tall one with black hair. "It's you and me and Mommy," she explained. "For when the judge asks if I want to stay with you forever, I'm going to show her this picture so she knows we're a family." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. These moments still caught him off guard. Mia's straightforward acceptance of their unusual situation, her resilience in the face of trauma, her capacity for love, despite her losses. "It's perfect," he managed to say. "The judge will love it." Mia studied him, her head tilted in that now familiar way. "You look sad again. Are you thinking about Mommy?" "Yes," James admitted. He had learned that honesty was essential with Mia. She had an uncanny ability to detect insincerity. "Sometimes I feel sad about the things I didn't say to her, or the time we didn't spend together." Mia climbed onto his lap, something she had only recently become comfortable doing. "Mommy said it's okay to be sad sometimes, but not all the time because then you miss the happy parts." Out of the mouths of babes. James hugged her gently. "Your Mommy Izzy was very smart." "The smartest," Mia agreed solemnly. "That's why she knew I needed to be my daddy when she couldn't be here anymore." The simple statement, delivered with a child's certainty, left James momentarily speechless. Had Isabel somehow foreseen this outcome? Had she known that in losing her, James might finally understand what truly mattered? "I have something for you," he said when he could trust his voice again. He reached into his desk drawer and removed a small velvet box. "I was going to save her after the adoption ceremony, but now seems like the right time." Mia opened the box carefully, revealing a delicate silver bracelet with a small rainbow charm. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her finger over the colorful enamel. "I had it made to match your scarf," James explained, helping her fasten it around her wrist. "So you'll always have a rainbow with you, even when your scarf needs washing." Mia examined the bracelet with delight, then threw her arms around James's neck. "Thank you. Can I show Sarah?" "Of course," he smiled, watching as she raced from the room, calling for Sarah to see her new treasure. Alone again, James turned back to the photograph of young Isabel. "I think we're going to be okay," he told her image softly. "I'm trying to be the person you always thought I could be." The adoption ceremony was small and intimate, held in the judge's chambers rather than a courtroom. Mia wore a new dress for the occasion, her rainbow scarf carefully arranged over her shoulders, her silver bracelet gleaming at her wrist. Director Martinez attended, along with Sarah and several staff members from the shelter who had known Isabel and Mia. David came too, having become a regular visitor to the house, and something of an uncle figure to Mia. When the judge asked Mia if she understood what adoption meant, the child nodded solemnly. "It means James is going to be my forever daddy," she explained. "We already promised each other." She held up her pinky finger to demonstrate the seriousness of the commitment. The judge smiled. "And is that what you want, Mia?" Mia looked at James, then back to the judge. "Yes, because Mommy Izzy loved both of us, so we should be a family." There wasn't a dry eye in the chamber as the judge signed the final papers, officially making Mia a Harrington. Afterward, they held a small celebration in Isabel's garden. The autumn day was unusually warm, allowing them to set up tables among the late-blooming flowers. Director Martinez presented Mia with a memory book the shelter children had made, filled with drawings and notes about their memories of Isabel. As afternoon faded into evening, James found himself alone near the garden's small fountain, a spot where Isabel had often sat, according to the gardener. He felt her presence strongly here, among the plants she had loved. Sarah approached, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "Quite a day," she observed, handing him one. "The best kind," James agreed. Over the months, Sarah had become not just Mia's nanny but a friend and ally in navigating the challenges of sudden parenthood. "Isabel would be proud," Sarah said, looking toward where Mia was showing her bracelet to Director Martinez. "Of both of you." "I hope so," James said. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if she'd just told me about Mia directly, if I'd been more attentive." If Eleanor hadn't, he stopped. The familiar spiral of what-ifs threatening to overcome the day's joy. You can't change the past, Sarah reminded him gently. But Mia's future, that's something you can shape. James nodded, watching as Mia ran toward them, her face alight with excitement. Daddy, Director Martinez says I can help with the Christmas party at the shelter. Can we, please? Daddy. She had started using the term spontaneously a few weeks ago, testing it out hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence. Each time it filled James with equal parts joy and humility, the knowledge that he was being given a gift he hadn't earned, but would spend his life trying to deserve. Of course we can, he assured her. We'll make it the best Christmas party ever. Later that night, after Mia was asleep in her room, once a cold guest suite, now transformed with colorful walls and twinkling fairy lights, James visited Isabel's study one last time. He had preserved it largely as she had left it, but tomorrow it would be renovated into a playroom for Mia, a place filled with life and laughter rather than secrets and sorrow. He ran his fingers over her desk, remembering the hidden journals, the secret life she had felt compelled to hide from him. On an impulse, he opened the copy of The Rainbow Fish that now sat prominently on a shelf. A loose page fell out, a letter he hadn't noticed before, tucked into the book's binding. Isabel's handwriting covered the page, just days before her death. My dearest Mia, it began. If you're reading this yourself, it means you've grown up without me, and I'm so sorry for that. I promised I'd never leave you, and I meant it with all my heart. Sometimes, though, life takes us places we don't expect to go. James sank into Isabel's chair, his hands trembling slightly as he continued reading. I want you to know that you saved me. Before you, I was lost in a beautiful but empty life. You showed me what real love feels like. Love without conditions or expectations. Just pure joy in being together. If I'm not there to see you grow up, please know that I've arranged for you to be safe and loved. And if somehow you find yourself with James, know that beneath his serious exterior is a good man who once knew how to love freely, before the world taught him to guard his heart. Perhaps you can teach him what you taught me, that love is the only thing that truly matters in this life. Whenever you see a rainbow, think of me. I'll be watching over you, my special girl, my unexpected blessing. All my love forever, Mommy Izzy. James wiped tears from his eyes, the letter confirming what he had come to suspect, that Isabel had somehow known her time was limited, that she had been preparing not just for her escape, but for the possibility of her death. And somehow, against all odds, her final wish had been fulfilled. Mia was safe, loved, and home, not at the shelter or with strangers, but with him, the husband who had failed Isabel in life, but might yet honor her in death by giving Mia the loving family Isabel had dreamed of. He carefully returned the letter to the book, knowing that someday when Mia was older, he would share it with her. For now, though, it was enough to know that Isabel had forgiven him in advance, had seen the possibility of redemption, even when he was blind to his own failings. In the garden beyond the window, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. James thought of Eleanor, in her prison cell, still believing she had acted to protect the Harrington legacy. She had never understood that legacy wasn't about money or power or social position. True legacy was what you left in the hearts of those who loved you. Isabel had understood, and now, because of Mia, James understood too. Thank you, he whispered to the stars, to Isabel, to whatever fate had brought them all together, torn them apart, and then created this new possibility from the wreckage. I'll take care of her, I promise. As if in answer, a shooting star streaked across the autumn sky, a fleeting moment of brilliance, gone too soon, but leaving light in its wake. Every family has its secrets. Every relationship has its unspoken truths. Isabel and James's story reminds us that sometimes we don't truly see the people we're closest to until it's too late. On Mia's 6th birthday, James took her to visit Isabel's grave. They brought forget-me-nots from the garden and a handmade card with a rainbow painted across the front. Can she see us? Mia asked, arranging the flowers carefully against the polished stone. I think so, James said, in a way. Mia nodded, satisfied with the answer. I'm taking good care of your rainbow scarf, Mommy, she told the grave seriously, and Daddy is taking good care of me. We both miss you, James added softly, but we're keeping our promises. As they walked hand in hand back through the cemetery, Mia looked up at the sky, where rain clouds were breaking to reveal patches of blue. Look, Daddy, maybe we'll see a rainbow on the way home. I hope so, James smiled. Your mom would like that. In the distance, against the gray clouds, the first hints of color began to appear, a perfect arc of promise that bridges past and future, loss and hope, endings and beginnings.